It's the Awesemo NFL Week 15 Final Look Show. We are sponsored by Yahoo again this week. And as always, guys, don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the podcast network, and give us a thumbs up. Jordan Klein playing the fire Christmas beats, even though his intern may have not made his coffee properly right there. I saw him making a little bit of a yucky face right before the show was about to start. But it's okay. He still had all the beats going. Jeff, Week 15 here. What do you make of this slate? How do you feel about it?
Excited, man. We got a ton of big contests on DraftKings. You got the Fantasy Football World Championships. I think there's some good games here. I mean, we got a bunch of late breaking news on Friday too. Hill out, Breeze in, Thomas out, Kamara now going to get a bajillion targets. So the chalk has moved a little bit. I think we got some interesting games. Tennessee going up against a weak team, Arizona, Philly, KC, and New Orleans. I think it's a good slate.
Yeah, for sure. I think starting right there with the quarterback position, earlier in the week, it looked like Lamar Jackson was going to be the stone-cold chalk of the slate at the position, but it's evened out a little bit now. We've got three quarterbacks coming in over 10% ownership. Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, and Patrick Mahomes. All three of these guys cost $7,000 plus on DraftKings. So if you're rostering one of these guys, who is the one that you want to pay up for in cash games?
Yeah, so cash game's definitely different. Cash game's probably, I don't even know. I was about to say Lamar, but I don't even know. I don't know if that's necessarily the take you have to have. I think Jacksonville slows things down a little bit more. I think I would take this discount with Kyler, to be honest. And I really think this is a good bounce back spot for Kyler Murray. You look at his home road splits too. Way bigger upside, I don't know, this year. He's had way bigger games. I think the Eagles defense has given up. Yeah, they've given up the most rush yards to opposing QBs on the season. And look, a lot of that is matchup based. I get it, but still, it's not a good sign going up against Kyler Murray. And again, I just feel like this Eagles rush defense maybe isn't as good as people think. So I think it's a big bounce back spot for Murray. He's the cheapest of the three as well. So I'm pretty much rolling with Kyler as my answer in all categories this week.
Yeah, I'm actually going to go with Lamar Jackson amongst those high-end guys, my favorite play for a couple reasons. Number one, it's like, did he get like COVID with steroids or something? Because look at his numbers since he came back off the COVID list. We got Lamar Jackson last week rushed for 124 yards and 2 touchdowns. The week before, 94 yards and a touchdown. One thing that's really nice about Lamar Jackson that we've seen in the second half of the season that we didn't see as much in the first half is he's running the ball a lot more. So his fantasy production is starting to look more like what we got from Lamar Jackson last year, where he kind of just broke the quarterback position from a fantasy standpoint. And now we're getting that guy who's rushing the ball, 10 to 15 times per game, over 100 rushing yards in a lot of these games. And that's giving him a really high combination of ceiling and floor. And here's the other thing to consider about Lamar Jackson. Well, obviously also a really strong matchup against the Jaguars, but also we've got Hollywood Brown out. We've got this team has been dealing with COVID situations for a while now. So it's like, what are they going to rely on the offense? And I kind of think it's just going to have to be Lamar running the ball, right? They haven't all that much success with him throwing. And then we also add that Hollywood Brown's out. I think we're going to see Lamar Jackson even more inclined to run the football. So I don't disagree with you that Kyler Murray is a good play. I'm going to have exposure to him in GPPs also. But if I was building a cash lineup where I had to pay up for one quarterback, I would go with Lamar.
Yeah, it's definitely a fair take. Like I said, it is obviously really close. I mean, I just about said Lamar Jackson myself, but with the price discount and stuff, I think both those guys are in play. I don't think you're necessarily making a mistake by going to either one of those guys. I'm sure there's people who would, maybe be higher on one than the other, but those two guys obviously rated out really highly for us as well, just on the Awesemo site, and they're both coming in as the top two projected ownership QBs as well.
And if I'm going to save money at quarterback in cash games, I'm going right back to our guy Jalen Hurts from a week ago, who, as I've said to people during the week, I got absolutely crushed last week. It was one of my worst weeks of the season, but I hung my hat on that we're on the right side of Jalen Hurts, as everybody got upset about us last week for talking about him during the show.
Upset. Weirdly upset. And it wasn't just this show, Greg. Like every time I talked about Jalen Hurts, people told me that he sucked. Like it was like, do people not understand that this guy was like a prolific college quarterback? It was really weird. I'm not gonna lie. I felt very vindicated as well. But I definitely think you can go back to him at 5,900 here. He's still a little bit too cheap for a rushing quarterback. The Philly offense, you like to see Doug Peterson adjusting the offense for Jalen Hurts. More RPOs, shorter passes. Hurts didn't get sacked once last week against New Orleans. Arizona's front seven is pretty good too, but they're not quite as good as New Orleans. So I can't see the result being that much different.
And the other thing about Jalen Hurts is still, I'm not sold on him being a great throwing quarterback, that he's going to be great in the NFL. But to our point last week, the one thing we knew about him is he can run the ball and he's willing to do it. So where his fantasy production really came from last week, he ran the ball 18 times. That is a ridiculous amount for a quarterback with his ability to run the football. And it wasn't even like for the quarterback position, he was crazy efficient running the ball. I mean, 18 carries for 106 yards. But when you have a quarterback who's that willing to run the football, it's hard to have a bad fantasy game, especially when he's as cheap as he was. And even though he's gotten a little bit more expensive, 5,900 is still too cheap for him, to your point from before. And that's why we have him projected as the number one points per dollar quarterback on the slate. So I actually do think that overall, Jalen Hurts, as I like him as the cheap quarterback. I said I like Lamar Jackson as my expensive quarterback in cash games. But if I was going to one of them, it would still be Jalen Hurts as the guy that I want to roster in cash.
Yeah, and look, on this slate, I actually think that going cheap at QB makes more sense. We have Kamara in play now. Derrick Henry's in a big spot. It feels more like a jam it in week than we've had for a while, like at RB. We just want to get like exposure to the top three RBs from touches, and they're expensive, right? So I think Jalen Hurts definitely, as a cash game play, I agree. He'd definitely be my cheap pick as well. And, again, just to your point of rushing QB, I mean, he's not Kyler Murray, but I think he's more Cam Newton than people realize. And this guy is like built, like he doesn't look that big on the field, but he is really, really big. You could see him just plowing into the line a couple times. So this isn't going to stop. Like he's going to keep running the ball 100%. That's what he does. That's what he did in college. He's too cheap still. I thought he might actually get over 6K this week on DraftKings, and he didn't. So.
And what's nice about him, too, is you don't have to play him with any of his wide receivers. Actually, I think it's preferable to not play him with one of his wide receivers. Because if we look at what he did last week, where, despite the great fantasy game, I mean, he had 30 pass attempts for 167 yards. It's really not very good. So, and the other thing, too, is, I mean, the Eagles don't exactly have any terrific wideouts you want to target with them, and it's hard to figure out who those guys are. So it's easy enough to just plug Hurts in as a naked value quarterback, and then you just pay up for some of the other guys on the slate that we're going to talk about later that I think make for really strong pay up options. So somebody else I want to ask you about, because you've been on the right side of him a couple times this year. I was not on Mitchell Trubisky last week. You were. He ended up playing pretty well. Another good matchup for him against the Vikings. Are you going back to Mitchell Trubisky, or are you going to rein in your exposure to him a little bit? Because whatever you say here is what I'm going with, Jeff. You've been the Mitchell Trubisky guy.
Yeah, I mean, I do like the spot. Like, I think he's in play. It's just, is the upside there for him to like come through? And because we have Kyler, Lamar, Mahomes, and then Hurts as a good value option. Like, I just don't know. I almost feel like you're getting a little bit too fancy. Like, I do think that Trubisky has real upside this week, but he's got to outscore some big names. Like, I mean, Kyler could drop 40, and if Trubisky gets like 28, it almost doesn't matter. Like, I mean, yeah, I guess it does matter because there's a pretty big price difference, but I feel like you got to chase those big numbers at the high end. So I wouldn't say that I'm definitely not off Trubisky. I think it's a great spot. Minnesota without Eric Kendricks, that's a big thing. He's fast, good in coverage. It's going to open up David Montgomery. It's probably going to open up, just Cole Kmet a little bit. And then we got some crap corners for Minnesota. Like Darnell Mooney has a very good chance of catching a long touchdown here. He's going up against Chris Jones, who runs like a 4.6. I think it's a really good spot for Mitch in the dome too. It's just, again, like if I'm ranking QBs who I want exposure to, like Kyler, Lamar, definitely you want some of that. Mahomes, it's always good to get a piece of KC. So, Trubisky kind of almost falls in like fifth, even though I do like him this week. But, you don't have to be crazy to go overweight on him either. If you're making like 20 lineups, I would definitely slot Mitch in there with a couple like bear stacks or something. But it just feels like the way the slate's breaking down, like you really need like a crazy good performance for him, because it feels like you're going to get 40 from someone like Lamar or something or Kyler this week. So that's kind of where I stand on Mitch. I like the upside. I love the price. Didn't increase, but I'm just not sure if you necessarily need to go crazy with the bear stacks. Like maybe just playing Montgomery or Robinson on their own is the play this week.
So somebody else here, another reason that, well, other than I'm generally not a huge Mitchell Trubisky guy, there's a guy in the same price range that's picking up almost no ownership this week, and that's Drew Brees, coming back from the injury at 5,900. I think this is a really interesting spot for him, and then Alvin Kamara also has become the chalk of the slate. But so Drew Brees, number one, this is a game that really sets up where he's going to have to throw the ball. He's also at home in a dome playing against KC. And I think we have to assume the Chiefs are going to put points up on the board in this game because they do, in basically every single game. So the Saints are going to have to throw to keep up. Drew Brees is pretty cheap, 5,900. This is the lowest price tag he's had basically in forever that I could find looking through his game log really quick. So I see that salary on Drew Brees, and there's part of me, it's like really like we're comparing Mitchell Trubisky to Drew Brees. They're in the same price range. And I know that Brees is coming back from injury, but I think this is a really good spot for him at a depressed price with the field just not on him.
That is an interesting take. I thought you were going to say Matt Ryan, and I was about getting ready to flame you because Matt Ryan is terrible. You should never play Matt Ryan anymore. I'm sure he'll throw 4 touchdowns out, but that is an interesting take. I admit, like he is probably going to have to throw the ball a ton here. KC opponents have been throwing it an immense amount because their defense has been, letting sort of more prevent play. And their offense is obviously humming. And when KC gets them out in front, the other team has to play at a faster pace. So, yeah, I mean, there's an opportunity to get like 45 passes here from Drew Brees. So I don't hate this take at all. Definitely, obviously more of a GPP play coming off the injury and stuff and no Mike Thomas, but it's viable, 100%. I mean, you're looking for ways to get exposure to this game. Everybody wants to play Kamara. Why not play the quarterback guy if he's going to get like 15 targets? Kamara is. I mean, so yeah, I don't hate it under 6K. Absolutely. I think it's an interesting call between him and Trubisky. Actually, Brees might get a little bit more volume, but I think Trubisky has that like better big play ability and he runs a little bit. So I think both those guys are GPP viable for sure. Just trying to see if there's anyone else under here under 6K who I even kind of want to talk about, but I don't think there is. I think those two guys would be the plays there for me. Anyone in the 6K range? I mean, Tannehill's kind of interesting. I think that going against like, if Tennessee scoring like 28, 30 points and Derrick Henry isn't having the greatest game, it's probably going to be because Tannehill threw 4 touchdowns, right? So I think that's the other QB that's in play. But under 6K, definitely Brees and Trubisky, obviously, and Hurts we already talked about. So it's a really interesting slate for QBs. Like I said, it feels like someone's going to throw or get 40 points up there. But if one of these value guys comes through with like a really solid game, like 28, 30 points, like I said, they could end up factoring in too. So, right there, I think you got 6 QBs we mentioned. And I don't think you need to get any crazier than that, quite frankly. This is definitely not a week at QB where I feel like you need to get too cute.
Yeah, you mentioned Ryan Tannehill, and that could transition right into the running back position for this reason. Earlier in the week, I thought that Ryan Tannehill in the Titans passing game made for a good leverage play because it looked like Derrick Henry was going to be really popular. And I thought that made a whole lot of sense to be like, hey, if Derrick Henry is going to be popular, give me exposure to Ryan Tannehill and somebody like Jonnu Smith, because that's a good way to get leverage off of Derrick Henry. And maybe you could get the Titans to score touchdowns against the Lions in a different way. But then what happened is now that Michael Thomas has been ruled out and Drew Brees is officially back and starting on Sunday, now the ownership for Alvin Kamara is through the roof. And what happens as a result of that is just Derrick Henry gets more muted and he just becomes kind of one of the guys at the running back position. So that's kind of what got me off of somebody like Tannehill. But then talking about some of that running back ownership, Alvin Kamara projected for nearly 40% ownership right now. How much exposure do you want to get to him? And are you willing to pay a little bit extra to pivot off of him and maybe get to somebody like a Derrick Henry or Dalvin Cook?
I mean, it's such a weird week. Like, I didn't even think I'd have to think about Alvin Kamara much this week. I mean, maybe it's like just sprinkle him in play and things like that. And I was actually kind of big on Jonathan Taylor in this range, but I don't know how it's hard to justify Taylor over Kamara right now. Kamara's going to be on the field so much. The targets are going to be there. It's just automatic. So, I think the play now is like you said. I mean, Derrick Henry, I don't know if he'll come in with half the ownership of Kamara, but it's definitely like it could get to that, right? So it's definitely going to be a good pivot. For me, I would probably rather be. I don't know if I want to be too overweight on him just because the ownership is so crazy. It looks like it's going to get to a point where like we could be seeing like a near 50% owned player. I mean, it's 7,400 Alvin Kamara. And the field realized this really quick. He's too cheap. I mean, he's too cheap for a guy who's averaging like an insane amount of targets without Michael Thomas and with Drew Brees as his quarterback. Like we have history on this. So this isn't going to change. This isn't going to be something where, I don't think people are going to talk themselves out of it and we're going to get like, oh, he's only 25% owned. I think this will probably creep past 40 and I think it will be. So For me, yeah, I think field average is okay if you want to go a little bit over that. But I want to get some more Derrick Henry exposure now. Again, I'm not sure about the other guys in this range like Jonathan Taylor. There is one guy under Kamara who I like almost as much, and I do think is a good pivot though. He's a guy I've talked trash about a lot, Greg.
Can I guess who it is?
Yes, you can.
Well, this is actually really tough. So he's priced under him. Is it going to be David Montgomery?
It is David Montgomery. David Montgomery.
Yeah, I don't like David Montgomery very much.
He looks good. And remember when I mentioned Eric Kendricks is out? This is a good spot for David Montgomery, man. Who else is going to get the kind of volume that we're getting? David Montgomery's going to get the kind of volume.
I don't know if he is. He got 11 carries last week. I mean, I get he had an 80-yard touchdown and he ran like crazy. But here's David Montgomery's touches the last few weeks. 11 carries at 113 yards. The week before, he had 17 carries. That's nice, but 72 yards, that's not all that efficient. Then the week before, he had 11 carries for 103 yards against the Packers. So I'm looking at it, it's like I can't project that David Montgomery is going to carry the ball 20 times because it's not what he's doing. He's just getting 12 carries and breaking off an 80-yard touchdown, and then he just runs for 10 yards per carry. I'm not a believer in that kind of volume. I'm off of Montgomery. I wish that his ownership would have been higher. It actually was fairly high earlier in the week, and then we got Alvin Kamara as a viable play in that same price range. I just like Kamara a lot. I'm going to be massively overweight to him. I got lucky. I actually do have a bet on him for over 3.5 receptions, which I'm just already considering a win. That was what his prop was when Taysom Hill was still considered potentially starting quarterbacks. And once Drew Brees was ruled in and Michael Thomas ruled out, which kind of all came in as a whirlwind at the same time, I went to DK Sportsbook and I saw 3.5 receptions for Alvin Kamara. That's an automatic win. So besides the point, the 3.5 prop is not what's really gearing me towards Alvin Kamara here. But I would be stunned if he doesn't have 10 catches in this game. You look at some of his target numbers from earlier in the season when Michael Thomas was out and Drew Brees was the quarterback. And we saw, pretty regularly games like against the Packers, 13 receptions on 14 targets against the Chargers, 8 receptions on 10 targets, 8 for 8 against the Panthers, 9 on 13 against the Bears. This is somebody who, when Drew Brees is the quarterback and Michael Thomas is out, he becomes the focal point of the passing game. So Alvin Kamara has gone from a guy who's totally irrelevant in DFS with Taysom Hill as quarterback to all of a sudden he becomes the guy. So I think that Alvin Kamara is a must play in cash games. I don't think you're going to disagree with that. But then in GPPs, I'm personally going to be overweight to him as well.
And look, I'm not, this isn't like hot take central like it was with Hurts last week, but I'm not saying Montgomery over Kamara or something like that. I'm just saying I like Montgomery in this range. Like I really do. And I think for GPPs, he's a good add-in. Like if you're going to play Kamara and you're going to fade Derrick Henry, or you just don't want to pay up for both of them, Montgomery is the guy I would pivot to next. I do think he's in play. I get that the carries, maybe they're not running it as much, but this is a player who's heavily involved in the pass game. I mean, he's averaging 5 targets or less, 3 games. And again, we have to look at these Bears games in a little bit of context. I mean, they didn't do anything in the second half last week because they were up 30 points. Like they literally didn't do anything on offense. So that's not going to be the case this week. We had a close point spread with Minnesota. Minnesota scores points. I think that game is sneaky shootout potential. I like getting Montgomery as a piece there anyways, but completely agree with your overweight on Kamara take. Look, and like I said, I wouldn't be underweight on him. I can get like the field average kind of vibe where he's just so owned that maybe you want to, just hedge your bets a little bit somewhere else. But I think for me, this range is, I still kind of like Jonathan Taylor, but again, with Montgomery there and now Kamara, really hard for me to go back to him. I get Derrick Henry is getting more interesting the lower his ownership projections dropped. But I think you start with Kamara, decide what you're going to do there, and then you branch out to the other guys. Like I said, Montgomery and Henry, those are the 2 guys I'm really targeting there. And paying down for Montgomery is pretty appealing as like my RB2. So.
Yeah, and I think there are a bunch of interesting running back 2s on this slate, though, that I do prefer to Montgomery. For starters, I mean, Cam Akers, who you look at the matchup against the Jets, and on one hand, you think like, whoa, what happens if the Rams get up by a lot of points? I don't think it's going to matter because they absolutely demolished the Patriots, and all they did in the second half was give the ball to Cam Akers. So look what Cam Akers did in that game where they ended up winning. It was 24-3, and the game was well out of hand in the second half. And Akers finishes with 29 carries for 171 yards. 3 targets, 2 receptions. He was the guy in the backfield for them. So at 6,600, he's my favorite RB2. I think that Alvin Kamara and Cam Akers makes for a really good combination. I like Leonard Fournette this week also, assuming that he starts with Ronald Jones out. There's a lot of guys that make for good value at the running back position that I think is going to make it so that I don't really pay up at the position all that much.
Yeah, you mentioned, Fournette. That's going to be an interesting one to watch. I mean, I feel like if anything is going to bust the slate, it'll probably be Leonard Fournette. That's just what he does. LaShawn McCoy actually looked good last week. So Fournette will be a spot I'll probably be fading just because of that. Like, I think they'll try and get Vaughn involved as well. So at the same time, like, I get that why people are going there. It's 4,500, right? Realistically, this guy could pay off on 15 touches. So, but that'll probably be a spot I'm fading. One of the reasons I am going to fade that spot, Chase Edmonds is questionable. And I like the way they're using Kenyon Drake. Teams are overcommitting now to Kyler Murray in the red zone. Drake has touchdowns in 4 straight games. Philly's let a bunch of rushing touchdowns over the last little bit. And look, if we get Drake should push for his highest snap count of the year here if Edmonds is out. Even if he's questionable, I still kind of like Kenyon Drake. So I think the play for me in GPPs will be paying up for Drake to get away from the Fournette chop.
Yeah, I mean, here's the deal, though. I mean, the difference in ownership between Kenyon Drake and Leonard Fournette, it's not that significant. Kenyon Drake projected for 14% ownership, Fournette projecting for 20%. So, yeah, there is a gap there, but it's not like nobody's on Kenyon Drake and everybody's on Leonard Fournette. Maybe if this was a situation where there wasn't a chalk Alvin Kamara, then we'd see Fournette being the guy who is, like 30, 35% owned. But so much of the ownership is going towards Kamara that people aren't quite there on Fournette. He's still plenty popular, don't get me wrong. But I don't necessarily see Kenyon Drake as some guy that I really want to pivot to. I get your point, though.
Let me put it a different way. I just like Kenyon Drake this week better than Leonard Fournette because that's a fair point. The last time I checked the ownership, I think Drake was a little lower, but he's probably getting some heat, so to speak, because of the Edmonds news broke. But I just like the upside better for Drake. Like I said, I think the snap count is more secure. I think Tampa is way more likely to rotate 3 running backs in than Arizona. And I just like the matchup. Maybe not a little bit better, but I like Arizona's offense a little bit better than Tampa's. So, and quite frankly, I like the player better. So maybe not like the pivot play, like you said, Greg, but I would still rather have that player in my lineup and pay up for him than Fournette.
So I'll say this. I'll be heavier on Drake, or I'll be into him if Chase Edmonds is ruled out. If Chase Edmonds is just questionable, ends up playing or something like that, then whatever. I can't go back to Kenny Drake again. Fool me once, shame on you, but fool me 8 times. And that's really a bad one on my end, because that's really where I'm at with Kenny and Drake. I've been burned by this guy so many times this year. There's been so many spots where it looked like he was going to be in position to have a good game. And really, he's had 2 good fantasy games all year. And one of them was on a primetime game against the Cowboys, where the Cowboys were totally decimated. And he reeled off, was it the 85-yard run or something like that on the last play of the game. So it's Kenyon Drake. It's just hard for me to go to a guy who has burned me so many times this year, even though it's not necessarily something that I really weigh all that much, where it's not a thing where it's like, oh, this guy has played poorly when I roster him, therefore I'll never roster him again. But it's more from a standpoint of Kenyon Drake just hasn't had good games this year at all. So the reason that I haven't had good games in our roster him is because he never has good games. And even though he has had the touchdowns recently, he's very touchdown dependent because he's not been efficient running the football. He has, 2 games all year where he has over 5 yards per carry. And even these recent games that have been okay, 3.5 yards per carry, 4.9 against the Rams. That's decent. But then 3.5 yards per carry against the Patriots, 2.6 yards per carry against the Seahawks. So I get he scored touchdowns in those games, but if he does not score touchdowns, those are also just terrible fantasy games. Yeah,
absolutely. He's been touchdown dependent. And I just feel like the matchup with the Eagles here too, as my computer don't freeze. Okay, good. My computer's about to freeze. The matchup with the Eagles, I think is it's gonna be a fast paced game, and Drake is kind of falls into the area of I just want exposure to this game, and I feel like the Arizona running back position is actually in a pretty good spot here. So I think this is actually a spot where a sneaky like Drake. And again, this kind of hinges on Edmonds being out, but like a Drake Kyler Murray stack, you get exposure to all the touchdowns. You're going up against, like I said, a Philly defense who isn't as good against the run as people think. I think that could be a sneaky stack this week. That's something I'm going to be putting out there for sure. Using Drake Murray, probably with no wide receivers. If you do get the Drake screen pass and then you get like a Kyler and a Drake rushing touchdown, I think that's very viable. Arizona doesn't throw for a ton of touchdowns, but they run for a lot. So that's kind of the way I'm approaching this Arizona game. I definitely get the take on Drake and why people are down on him. It's rightfully deserved, but again, you could get like 80-90% snaps. So for me, he's definitely in play. I like him as a GPP play more than Fournette. I understand why people are going to Fournette though. There's just really no one else down there under 5K, right, Greg? Like who really sticks out. I know I went through this last week. I'm like, who am I going to pivot to off of Fournette? And quite frankly, the pivot might be LaShawn McCoy.
Yeah, no, I think there's sense
honestly,
to him as leverage
playing
play.
LaShawn McCoy might be the pivot off of Fournette. So because I don't really have anyone else down there to talk about.
Yeah, so I think the other thing too is, I mean, you look at how cheap these Buccaneers running backs are, and it's a good matchup, and Ronald Jones is out. Somebody is going to have a good game just by the nature of the pricing, right? I mean, they're playing against the Falcons, and one of those running backs is probably going to score 12 to 15 fantasy points, which is a fairly decent outcome for that price. And so you have to figure what has to happen for Fournette to fail. Either Tampa Bay really goes nuts with the passing game. Maybe that happens, but then they probably get up ahead anyway, and somebody's running out the clock out in the fourth quarter. The other way it happens is if LaShawn McCoy or Keyshawn Vaughn ends up being the guy who they go to at running back. It's hard for me to really trust in Vaughn just because he hasn't really played much this year. But to your point, yeah, McCoy played a little bit last week, and Leonard Fournette was a healthy and active. He was a scratch last week. So You have to think, at least for last week, McCoy was ahead of Leonard Fournette on the depth chart. So I think that is a pretty solid point by you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, hey, I'm trying to bring one per episode, right? So no, I do think McCoy is kind of interesting. I know I was interested in him at the start of the week, and I honestly, this is my Fournette take, but I mean, I think he's the chalk to fade, and I think actually, I think again, you make a good point. We're saying one of those running backs probably going to do something. So I think McCoy is in play this week for GPPs. Obviously, not cash games. If you're not high on McCoy, just go elsewhere. Or if you're not high on Fournette, just go elsewhere. But one other running back situation that the chat's bringing up, I think rightfully so. Mostert and Jeff Wilson going up against the Dallas Cowboys. They're terrible. They allow the most yards per carry to opposing running backs. I can't trust Raheem Mostert. He wasn't even getting a ton of carries when he was healthy. But I think Jeff Wilson Jr. is interesting. Again, you can't use him in a cash game because you don't know what the volume's going to be. But if Mostert gets out there, takes 2 carries, and is like, oh, my ankle's done. Wilson is going to be involved regardless of what Mostert does. He's been playing 40-50% of the snaps, and he's more of the pass-catching back. If Mostert goes out early in this game, you could just see Jeff Wilson Jr. take like 20 touches, and he could definitely go off against Dallas. So I think Wilson's in play, but again, you're not going to need to be crazy. I don't think his ownership is up there anymore. I don't think you'll need to be crazy overweight on him anyways to be overweight in the field. So.
Yeah, so we have Jeff Wilson is currently projected for 2% ownership. Raheem Mostert's projected for 1%. So here's my take on these guys. Though there are so many good plays and value at the running back position. I'm just not digging that deep. I'm not getting involved in a timeshare situation that I'm not all that confident in, because the 49ers, they've been impossible to predict at running back for forever. I mean, we saw that in the playoffs. It was like, oh, it's a Mostert game. It's a Tevin Coleman game. Like there's no way to predict it. I would rather put my money on some of these guys that I do know, at least, like Cam Akers, Alvin Kamara. I understand these guys are chalk, but even so, I feel more comfortable with that. Or if I am going to a committee play, I'd go to one of the Buccaneers guys over Jeff Wilson or Raheem Mostert, just because they're so much cheaper.
Yeah, no, and fair enough. Again, the nice thing is, again, we're talking 2% owned guys. So making 100 lineups, burning 4 on Jeff Wilson. It's not that big a deal, but definitely to Greg's point, you're making 3 max lineups. It probably is a little bit too deep with how good a spot some of these other guys are in. And again, Kamara being heavily owned is going to drag down the ownership on some other guys like Henry. So just before guys we go on, Greg's probably eager to move on to wide receiver. Hit the like button, guys. Let's get over 100. Let's do it. Greg and I will be back with the live before lock before the Saturday games. But hit that like button for us now. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, and more importantly, subscribe to the YouTube channel, because if we don't subscribe, I get a lashing in the Slack chat. That's what's really important, is those subscribe numbers. And that also helps us help you, because then you know when the shows go live. You know when Jeff and I's live before lock show goes for football later. And then we've also got MMA live before lock today. We've got NBA preseason live before lock. I'll also be hosting that one. There's all kinds of DFS sports going on right now. So subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can get all of the information for when all of those shows are about to go live. So the wide receiver position now, let's start with the chalk, because now that Michael Thomas has been ruled out, we've got Emmanuel Sanders priced all the way down at 4,200. Now, he wasn't massively involved in the offense when Taysom Hill was at quarterback, and a lot of that was just because Taysom Hill was running a lot more than Drew Brees is going to. Well, because Drew Brees isn't going to run it all, and Taysom Hill runs a lot, so that's pretty self-explanatory. The other thing, too, is when Taysom Hill was throwing the ball, all of his targets were basically going to Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas was getting targeted like 12 times per game. So if you look at the recent workload from Emmanuel Sanders, he has 12 targets over the last 3 games. Now that Thomas is out and Brees is back at quarterback, I think that Sanders is going to get a ton of targets in this game. I'm actually surprised he's only coming in around 20% ownership, because Emmanuel Sanders at 4,200, that's just a crazy low price tag to me. I think you absolutely have to play him in cash games.
Yeah. This slate, again, just got thrown on its head with this Brees Thomas stuff. It's nuts, because Sanders, I don't even think was in the conversation for people, going all the way up to Thursday. So you're right, though. The thing about Sanders is, I mean, I guess you could say that, Traquan Smith being there could be the guy who gets it. I think Emmanuel Sanders isn't as good a play as Alvin Kamara. I guess maybe we'll start there. Like, if I had to say, which one do you absolutely need to roster? It's Kamara. Kamara is the guy who's guaranteed targets. He's going to get a big workload. Sanders will get targets, but again, the big plays could go to Traquan Smith. It could go to whoever else there is out there. Callaway's still there, maybe. I mean, we have to look at the depth chart, right? But I'm not saying you should play the wide receiver 3s or 4s, but that's just the point. Like, the ball could go to those guys more. It's not going to go to another running back. He's there. He's going to get it. So for cash games, yeah, probably a must play. I don't disagree with that. He's 4,200. He's just too cheap, right? So, but again, I think GPPs, Sanders is more of a fade target for me. I definitely don't mind pivoting down to Traquan Smith in this spot. He was okay. And with Traquan, the nice thing is too, he's more of a big play receiver where, you get that 140-yard pass. So even if he gets 4 targets, you have more insurance, and he's $1,000 cheaper. So I think both those Saints guys are definitely in play. Sanders more for cash. For me, Traquan would be more the GPP play.
Yeah, so I think next what we should talk about is the high-priced wide receivers. But first, guys, today's show is sponsored by Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, the most trusted name in fantasy sports. Yahoo DFS now includes CSV upload and CSV edit features for those looking to play multiple lineups. Make better choices. Choose Yahoo Daily Fantasy. So the high-end wide receiver, we don't really have any of them that are massively chalky. There's a lot of guys in the 12 to 15% owned range. That is Tyreek Hill, Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, Allen Robinson, AJ Brown coming in at a little bit less ownership, but for the most part, these guys are all around the same in terms of ownership projection. So with that in mind, which is the wide receiver you think makes the most sense to pay up for this week?
None of them, maybe none of them is the answer. I mean, we got some big RBs to pay up for. We got rushing QBs. I kind of feel like, none of them might be the answer. I think for a pure GPP play, it's probably going to be Ridley, though, just to answer your question. I do like the spot for D-Hop as well, but I think, again, I'm doing a one-off where I want one guy to target, and I can kind of jam him in with maybe I'm fading Henry or something, or I'm going just a little bit more value. I think it's going to be Ridley. The Tampa Bay secondary, again, they allow, just Tampa in general, they allow a ton of pass attempts. They're a top 5 team in terms of pass attempts against. The volume's going to be there. So even if I think Matt Ryan sucks, he's probably going to be throwing 45 times in this game. It is a weaker secondary who allow good catch rates and stuff like that. Ridley, he had a little bit of an injury designation, but he doesn't have an official injury designation. He practiced in full. The targets are there. He's a good player. Beatable secondary. There's really nothing not to like, and the price is up too, so his ownership actually shouldn't be through the roof. At least it wasn't the last time I checked. Yeah, and I mean, he's pushed down, so under 15% projected ownership now in Awesemo. For me, it would be Ridley. I get the stacking got with other players here. If you're playing Mitch Robinson, if you're playing Tannehill, Brown, but one off, yeah, it'd be Ridley for me.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I made this point the other day too when I was doing the show with Matt Savoca. Is with Calvin Ridley, number one, we have a very favorable game script, because not only is Tampa Bay a team that generally allows a lot of pass attempts, but they're very good against the run. So teams just have to throw the ball against them. And this is also a game where the Falcons are, touchdown underdogs. They're probably going to have to throw the ball. Then we also have Julio Jones is out. So that's probably going to be more targets going to Calvin Ridley. And if you look at Ridley the last few weeks, 9 targets, 9 targets, 10 targets, 12 targets. He's been somebody that Matt Ryan is looking at a ton. So then you consider, a secondary that struggled a little bit in the second half of the season. The Falcons are going to have to throw the ball. Ridley probably getting a lot of the targets. And also to your point about the injury designation, he's no longer on the injury report. So we know that he's playing. And one thing about Ridley too, he's been on the injury report a lot this year. So that's just kind of a standard thing for him at this point. I'm not too concerned. So Ridley, I think, is the guy that I want to pay up for. Somebody like Tyreek Hill, I think he makes sense in game stacks with the Saints, but I'm not necessarily playing him on his own. DeAndre Hopkins, also not somebody I'm really dying to play. He's actually the most popular of all of these high-priced wide receivers. He's the one coming in at 17% owned, and I certainly would rather roster Calvin Ridley than DeAndre Hopkins, who we actually have Ridley projected for about 3 more fantasy points and coming in at less ownership. So Ridley is going to be the guy for me. Another guy I want to ask you about, because since you are the Bears guy of the program, Allen Robinson, what do you feel about him this week? Because I think if you want to go to somebody who's a little bit less expensive at the wide receiver position, even if I don't like Mitchell Trubisky, Allen Robinson seems to produce with whatever crap quarterback he's playing with anyway.
Yeah, no, Robinson's price is up a little bit, which probably has me, again, not liking him as much. Again, there's like, I like the Bears, but there's just a lot of like better spots, it feels like, this week. I mean, Brandon Ayuk at 6,300 versus Allen Robinson at 7,400. Really hard for me to take Robinson at $1,100 more. I think that the targeting there is going to be pretty equal, all things considered. The matchups there are both pretty equal. Robinson's got a great matchup. I mean, it's completely winnable, like I said, against Minnesota. You can definitely see a repeat performance, but like, let's not forget, Mitch has Montgomery to throw to. Darnell Mooney has a really good matchup, as I alluded to. Cole Kmet is coming on. There's a few more targets in play now for Chicago. So it's not guaranteed that like Robinson is 12, 14 plus, whereas Ayuk has actually been like a 14 target guy, like every game. There's really no one else to throw to. So all things considered, again, marching out Allen Robinson and like one Mitch Trubisky stack, making 10 lineups, sure. I don't think I can necessarily like endorse him though as like the super best play. And it's not even that I don't think it's a good upside spot. Like, it's not going to shock me if he gets 30 points. It's just, there's just better. I just feel like there's a few better plays. Like, again, and, projection wise, I think we have him out pretty well here. I got to get to the wide receiver position, but yeah, I mean, like he's still up there in terms of the top 5. So again, I'm definitely not talking down about this player, but I just feel like at this, with the value that we have and stuff like that, not necessarily like at the top of my list this week, but he's definitely in the mix.
So I have one contrarian value play at the wide receiver spot. I'm curious to get your take on it, and that is Lynn Bowden, who last week got 9 targets. The week before he got 4 targets. So it does seem like his overall workload is trending up, and just nobody's on this guy even after what he did last week. We have him projected for 2% ownership right now with 3,600. He actually looked like he was going to be a little more popular earlier in the week, but then when you have Emmanuel Sanders and Traquan Smith open up as viable targets, then you just kind of have Lynn Bowden as a guy who, like, yeah, he is an okay projection, but there just isn't really a need to go to him. I still like him, though. I think that as a guy who I like a lot of the chalk plays this week. So as I'm looking for somebody contrarian that I want to mix into my builds also, Bowden's somebody who stands out just because he's sub 4K. He got the 9 targets last week. And I think that he's somebody who the Dolphins want to get involved in the passing game in the last stretch of the season. So is he somebody that you think is viable, or do you think the 9 targets from last week is going to go away, or do you just prefer some of the other values maybe?
Yeah, so I just double checking the injury news here. If one of Parker or Grant play, yeah, absolutely, I can get behind this play. There's a couple things. I mean, Gesicki's questionable too. I don't think he's been ruled out. No, so we got like a ton of guys questionable here for Miami. And I think Bowden, for that reason, will stay low owned, and he'll be a good late pivot play. If Grant misses, Bowden is a similar type player. They'll get targets. So, I think the worry here is like it's New England and it's not the greatest matchup. Like, New England just plays so slow. It's not even that they're that good. They're just slow. Like, I don't know if there's going to be 9 targets to go around against New England like there was in a catch-up situation, against KC. So that's the worry. But if we get like multiple guys, like 2 of the 3 guys ruled out, who the hell else is Tua going to throw to? Like, there's nobody else there. So I think you wait on the injury news for Bowden. If like Grant and Parker play, I'd probably stay away. I just don't think the game script is going to be good enough. And we do have guys like Traquan and Sanders in that range. So, but again, you get two of these guys out. Yeah, absolutely. He's got to throw the ball to someone. So I definitely like a player I've had my eye on during the week. Haven't really gotten up there because the injury news has been so slow at Miami. I mean, we're not going to get any decision on it probably till tonight. So yeah, just something you got to wait on, but he's in play. Absolutely. He's good. Obviously was a guy people like coming out of college too, kind of like a bit of a Swiss Army knife player. So they'll get him involved. I think he actually works good with Tua because again, you can get him involved on short passes. So that makes sense. I'll throw my hot take for the week. Jalen Reagor scores a long touchdown at 4,400 and he outscores Emmanuel Sanders, Greg.
All right, I'm going to disagree with you. Here's the deal. It's obviously possible, but I mean, if you play this slate out 100 times, I think Sanders ends up outscoring Reagor 85 of the 100 times. But yeah, I mean, especially if you like Jalen Hurts and you don't want to play him naked, and if you're trying to find one of his pass catchers to stack him with, I do think Reagor would be the guy that I'd be most willing to stack Hurts with. Although my preference is still to play Hurts naked. I don't know that I'm going to get any exposure to Reagor. Maybe that'll change by the time I make lineups tomorrow, but I have a feeling it won't, just because there are so many cheap plays on this slate that I do prefer. And I would rather save money with somebody like Bowden, because I don't think it's all that likely that all of these guys who are listed as questionable by Miami all end up playing. And then even if they do play some of them, it could end up being like a Chargers situation where we had Mike Williams and Keenan Allen both listed questionable, end up playing, and then neither of them really even end up playing anyway, even though they're active, they don't do anything. So with all these guys that are banged up for Miami, I think it stands to reason that Bowden is going to see extra workload. Reagor, yeah, if you absolutely feel like you have to stack Jalen Hurts with somebody, then I think he's the guy. But I'm not sure I'm going to have him on my player pool.
And look, obviously, we're talking like, a Reagor Hurts stack here. And the nice thing about it is it's really low price. Like it's about 10K. So you get the long touchdown. Reagor's paid off. And then you have the cheap Hurts stack as well. So he's very much like he's probably going to go for like 120 to touchdown, or he's going to go for like 3 and 30 yards, right? So it's a complete boomer bust play. But I like the setup. Arizona's got been pretty bad against wide receivers. So that's just it's just my hot take. No one needs to freak out in the chat here. I'm not saying Jalen Reagor is the next Jerry Rice or anything, but that's just my hot take. Someone actually brought up CD Lamb there at 4,500. I think he's kind of in play as well. Against a weaker San Francisco secondary. So a player has a little bit of interest from me in there. I'm just going to throw out a couple names quickly because we're starting to run short on time. I think Adam Thielen is interesting in that Bears game. He's done really well against the Bears. I think, again, if you're using Montgomery coming back with like a correlated Thielen play isn't bad. You can get really low ownership on Thielen. And then T.Y. Hilton is a guy, I'm just going to play him. I think he looks great. I think him and Phillip Rivers is a connection I liked at the start of the year, and I think it's finally working. So I'm just going to keep playing T.Y. Hilton. Plus, he owns he's like the father of the Houston Texans. So
here's a question before we move on. What do you think it is about T.Y. Hilton that caused him to struggle at the beginning of the year that is no longer existing that's letting him play better? Because he was totally terrible up until, week 12? And then he's reeled off 3 good games in a row, 4 touchdowns over the last 3 games. He did nothing the first 10 games of the season, though. So what do you think flipped the switch with him? Is it just added comfort with Phillip Rivers? Is it just randomness? Maybe was he hurt earlier in the year? Because that's what's really hard for me to figure with T.Y. Hilton is how did he go from being so bad to all of a sudden like, hey, T.Y. Hilton's back?
I think for me, it did definitely look like Rivers just didn't want to throw him the ball. Like it just didn't look like good chemistry. But you never know with these guys. Like it could be an injury. I think I will buy the fact that it's just chemistry and Rivers just was like frustrated with whatever was going on and he just didn't throw it because Rivers is kind of that guy. So you're either kind of his guy or not. So I'll say it was more Rivers than T.Y. But it could be a little bit of both. Could be just a little. Maybe he's finding his legs. Like he's a little bit older. I really don't have like a complete answer. But he's healthy. He's not like that old. People are like, oh, he's done. Like I'm pretty sure the dude's only like 30 or something. So I'm buying this late season resurgent anyways. And I think 5,500. It's a really good price.
Yeah, well, you know why people thought he was done? It was because through week 11, he had 1 game where he scored more than like 9 fantasy points. The reason he was done is because he didn't do anything for the first 3 months of the season.
I know, Greg. I had him on like a bunch of best ball. So.
Yeah, and I do. On the Sunday show I do with Spags. He was on T.Y. Hilton every week until Hilton started playing well, and then he got off of him.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a lot of bad T.Y. Hilton takes where he was on him, and yeah, I'll be interested to do that show with Spags tomorrow and see if he's back on the T.Y. Hilton train after a few good games in a row.
Hopefully still off. Let me know.
We are running a special promo, guys. With NBA season about to start, we're offering $1 access through December 29th for all new customers when you use the promo code Caruso. This gives you access to everything we have to offer for the NBA preseason, which, I mean, whatever, that's only one game left. But you get access to all our Slack chat and everything we do for NBA preseason. And then for the regular season, get access to projections, ownership projections, Slack chat, lineup builder, and much more. So if you want to try out the NBA product, only $1 to try out for the first week of the regular season. So that is something to get in on. All right, Geoff, let's talk about the tight ends here because we have an interesting decision to make because Travis Kelce is by far the guy who's projected for the most fantasy points. But the issue I have with Kelce this week is opportunity cost because we've talked about so many high priced players. There's the running backs. There's, Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara. There's some high priced quarterbacks. Then at wide receiver, there's some good value, but there's also viable, expensive wide receivers. So I'm not going to say that Travis Kelce isn't in play, but I don't think I'm going to be overweight to the field. I'm probably going to be underweight just because of the opportunity cost. We're rostering him is going to come at the expense of somebody like Alvin Kamara or Derrick Henry or one of those other high-priced guys I like. So if I'm just ranking the expensive players on the slate, Kelce comes in behind those other guys to me. How do you feel about him?
Yeah, this is what I was talking about when I'm not sure how many high-priced receivers you really want to get exposure to because not only do we have the high-priced running backs, but you got Kelce here. How do you it's almost getting impossible to fade this guy. It's just so insane, the production right now. I mean, one game in his last 6 without 27 or more DK fantasy points. Absolutely insane. So just another player that you could definitely think about paying up for in some kind of extreme stars and scrubs, jam it in kind of lineup. So, I do agree with your take though. I feel like this is probably the spot where, again, tight end is just so random. We do have some guys at 3K who have legitimate upside. It's not guaranteed upside by any means, but it's good spots. Guys like Jared Cook. Maybe the whoever's going to go off for the Rams at tight end this week, Everett or Higbee, something like that, right? So to me, this is probably where you save. It's just such an extreme price difference for what you can possibly get out of the ceilings of these guys at 3K. Cole Kmet, another guy down there. So yeah, field average or under for me would be the take on Kelce as well. But again, I wouldn't put anyone off being like, yeah, I'm just building around Kelce and one of the running backs, and I'm just going to find a ton of value at wide receiver because that's where the better guaranteed value is, quite frankly. So it's kind of a conflicting situation. I want to play Travis Kelce, but at the same time, the way I'm making out lineups, it's kind of leading me towards just not really playing them. So
yeah, and I'll see what happens once I build lineups. But my gut feeling is I'm going to end up with not a lot of Travis Kelce just because of how much I like some of these other expensive guys. And then at cheap tight end, I mean, I think Dallas Goedert is viable. He was targeted 6 times by Jalen Hurts last week. I think Hayden Hurst is viable with Julio Jones out. I think he could get some extra targets. And then Jared Cook is actually you mentioned, he's my favorite of the cheap tight end just because we have Drew Brees back. We've seen Cook play well with Drew Brees before. And actually, we look at the price tag of Jared Cook earlier in the season. And that's something I always like to look at is historical pricing. And then you just see when somebody was in a similar situation, what was their projected price or what was their price? Because that's a good way to project what we expected their production to be at that point in time. And so earlier in the season when Drew Brees was healthy and Michael Thomas was out, Jared Cook was priced at $5,500 at tight end. So if you just look at him without much ownership at a $3,400 price tag, that's a massive discount. So Jared Cook is somebody who I think is a really solid tight end play that's going overlooked. He's probably going to be the one I end up with the most exposure to. Especially because I like Drew Brees quite a bit. I think you could roster Drew Brees with Alvin Kamara, with Jared Cook, with Emmanuel Sanders, because all those guys are cheaper than we are used to seeing them. So you could get kind of like a Saints onslaught stack, and then maybe that's where you bring it back with, maybe you pay up for Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelce also in that lineup if it works out. And I think that's the way I want to go about stacking the Saints game, and maybe that's where I would get, Kelce or Tyreek Hill into a lineup.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, I can't disagree with any of that. Cook was a guy I know I wrote up early in the week, even with Taysom Hill, just because of the game script, right? I mean, the game script against KC, not really that great against guarding against tight ends either. He actually good with fairly good with Taysom Hill, but I mean, obviously Drew Brees is buying as well. It's not like it's a downgrade or something. And now you have Michael Thomas being out as well, which so Jared Cook for me is the real target down there. I definitely agree Goddard. He's a little bit more expensive to get up to, but again, another guy you could think with a cheap stack with Hurts, probably a lot safer floor than using Rager too. I know I liked Rager, but under Cook, it gets dicey. Obviously, I mean, I know some guys in the chat. I don't mind using Gerald Everett. The Jets are just so bad at covering tight ends for whatever reason, and Everett is obviously an athletic dude. It's just his floor is like 2 points. I mean, legitimately, like you have like 5 receiving options there in the Rams, and they're going to be up big in that game. They might not even be throwing the ball in the second half, right? So Everett's dicey. He does have upside, though, in my opinion. Anyways, I think Cole Kmet is a very similar play. I think Kmet actually has a safer floor at this point. Jimmy Graham is questionable as well, so that's some injury news. I think if Graham was actually ruled out, I'd actually really like Kmet there. And then we got our boy who's just destroying lineups week in, week out, Greg, Jordan Akins. So 2,800 still. Yeah, he's in play. I mean, at some point this guy's probably going to catch like 6 passes again, but who knows when.
Well, I mean, you'd hope he could just catch a pass when he's wide open in the end zone with nobody near him, the ball's thrown right to him. But even that could not go for him. To your point, yeah, Jimmy Graham questionable, limited practice yesterday. If he's out, then Cole Kmet would stand out. The other one is, I mean, we talked about Gesicki being questionable. If he's out, then we have Durham Smith at 3,000. Maybe he's somebody who could stand out. He's somebody who the last few weeks, 3 targets, 2 targets, 3 targets. We know how much Tua's been targeting the tight end position with Gesicki. So without him, I think that Durham Smith is somebody else who could potentially get some of those targets. This is a position, though, where we have so many guys who are listed as questionable that I kind of feel like I need a little bit more information on who's going to be in or out to really know who I'm going to roster at tight end.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously we need some info on like all these guys and injury stuff and stuff like that. But I definitely think that the Graham news is big. Actually, another injury thing again, there are like quite a few guys under 4K in play. Irv Smith is in play again. Rudolph has been ruled out. So like that's just good news for that spot as well. Irv Smith has been getting like a ton of targets, and he's got a couple big wide receivers to soak him in, but he's 3,600 in a main pass catching role. And I think that game has a little bit of sneaky shootout potential. So I can't even hate him. I probably prefer to get up to Goddard there instead. But for me, I really feel like, again, it's Kelsey or it's like you're just going under 4K. I guess Hawkinson has a tiny bit of interest from me, but I don't even know, man. It's just 5,200, just go cheap or go all the way to Kelsey. So tight end continues to just be, a bit of a roll the dice play. We've probably talked about 5 or 6 viable guys in there you could think about for GPPs. I don't have huge, confidence in any of them. I think Cook is the most confidence. I think Kmet would probably be second for me once we got news, if we get news that Graham is out.
Yep, and I'm on the same page with you because that was going to be my next question. Is I was going to say, to simplify it, who are your favorite 2 cheap tight ends? And for me, it's Cook and Kmet. So I think we're on the same page there. Those are going to be the 2 guys I feel I'm going to end up with the most exposure to, and that is Kmet, assuming that Jimmy Graham is out. So a few minutes left, Jeff. We get to talk about my least favorite part of the entire show. Any defenses you have a strong take on this week?
So I think the 2 3K defenses for me are really where I like. I like the Patriots and I like the Bucks. Again, you've got the Pats. It's a rookie QB, and I know that narrative gets beaten to death, but hey, it works for the Patriots. And B, I mean, again, we do have a Dolphins team here. Ton of injuries. I mean, we talked about the Lynn Bowden thing. Like, that's fine if Lynn Bowden might end up being a good value play. That's not a good situation for the Dolphins offense, though. Like, if Lynn Bowden is their number 1 wide receiver and Gesicki's out as well, that is rough, man. Like, how are they going to score points? So I think you have a real good situation here for the Patriots to tee off on a rookie QB who's looked a little bit, dicey in the pocket when he's left. I know he scored points last week, but again, KC is just allowing points, a lot of points late in games to everyone. So I think the Patriots are definitely in play. I think they're going to be the lower owned compared to the Bucks. I do like the Bucks. I think they had 6 sacks last week. They got a really good D line, obviously. Matt Ryan's not playing well. No Julio for Matt Ryan is a big thing too. He plays just far worse with no Julio in the lineup. So I think the Bucks probably like the safer cash game play, but I really think the Patriots, and maybe you want to wait on the injury news for the Dolphins before you commit to the Patriots, but I still like the Pats this week.
Yeah, it's hard at defense. I mean, not that I ever go into a slate of defense and be like, this is the one. This is the defense.
Yeah, like that.
But yeah, the cheap defense are all in terrible spots. There isn't like one bad defense that's like, oh, but at least they're drawing, some backup quarterback or whatever, so we can look to them for value. There's no real situation like that. For the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, one reason I think that they are okay at 3,000 is just because we expect Matt Ryan to throw the ball, 40 plus times in this matchup, something crazy. At a bare minimum, he throws the ball 35 times. And when you have a mediocre quarterback to bad quarterback that's throwing the ball that many times, that's just opportunities for defense to score fantasy points, either via sacks, interceptions. The Falcons could put up 24, 28 points on the board in this game. But if Matt Ryan gets sacked 4 times, he throws a couple interceptions, that's still going to be an okay defensive performance. So I think that just because of how much I think Matt Ryan's going to have to throw the ball, that makes the Buccaneers viable. For the cheap end, though, there's really none of them that I think are viable.
Yeah, no, I'm really trying to stay up to like 3K this week just because I just don't even know. I mean, maybe you take a shot with the Texans. It is Phillip Rivers. Look, Phillip Rivers can throw some pick sixes with the best of them. He gets hit. Those lob balls go up. So I can't say I absolutely hate that, but man, oh man, like Eagles against Kyler, no. Washington against Russ, no. Atlanta against Tampa Bay. Atlanta might actually be the sneaky play down here. Again, Tampa Bay's offense, has looked a little wonky. Brady throwing some of these like air balls on the deep throws. Atlanta has shown a bit more teeth on defense. So I think down there, that might be where I go. But again, no confidence in it at all. That could just be a disaster. Like we just talked about building the Bucks up, and I just talked about how bad Matt Ryan's played. If they don't move the ball, I mean, that could be you could get negative points. So that's just kind of the week it is, like under 3K.
All right, so let's bring it home, Jeff. What is your favorite stack of the week?
Yeah, I'm going to throw out my Kyler Murray stack. I think Kyler Murray, and I don't even know if you have to pair him with a wide receiver. I'm just going to say Kyler Murray can get exposure to all the Arizona touchdowns. I think Kyler comes through with a big game. He's got great home splits, so that's my take.
Yeah, and I'm going to go with the stack that I mentioned before, a triple stack. Drew Brees, Alvin Kamara, Emmanuel Sanders, and Jared Cook. None of those guys are really all that expensive. I think it's very viable to go with a big Saints stack. We're getting a discount off these guys based on historical prices, so I think they all make for good value. And with Michael Thomas out, there's a lot of targets to go around in a game that we expect the Saints staff to throw the ball a lot. So that is going to be my stack of the week. That's going to wrap up the show, guys. Don't forget to like the video before you sign off. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're looking to try out the NBA product, use the promo code Caruso for access for $1 for the first week of the season. Shows coming up for the rest of the day. NFL Live Before Lock. Jeff and I will be doing that. And then Lofty's also going to be doing a NFL Live Before Lock as a show as well. MMA Live Before Lock. NBA Live Before Lock. MMA Live Before Lock. There's all kinds of Live Before Locks going on today. There's a whole ton of them. We've got like 15 DFS sports. There's probably some kind of esports going on somewhere or something also. So check out the Awesemo site. Jordan, play the kind Christmas music out the door for us.